On Thalia Mara Hall, a new chiller has arrived, but it has not yet been installed. Now, the building closed its doors back in August when the HVAC system broke down, causing mold throughout the building. Well, today, Jackson Mayor Chokwe Antar Lumumba says the new chiller cannot be installed until that mold is removed. The city expects to open bids for the repairs and remediation next week. Lumumba says the biggest holdup to reopening those doors is getting that mold out of the building.
Once the remediation work is accomplished, that should be sufficient for us to actually open Thalia Mara Hall again. But as we said, there's other work to be done to our aging facility, beautiful facility, but aging nonetheless. And so we look forward to doing that.
The mayor encourages you to visit the tab on the city's website for updates on the building's progress.